and a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us for this another session of the IQRN webinar series. My name is Raul Saibing. I'm a senior trainer at ATLAS.ti, also an assistant professor in the Faculty of Global Communications at Doshisha University in Kyoto, Japan. And today we have a wonderful presenter talking about community-based participatory research. So to dispense with the introductions, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague over at UBC, Eric Lee.
Well, thank you, Rolf, and welcome everyone for that. And I would like to say good mornings, good afternoon, good evenings, or good night, and to everyone and who joined across the world for that. So I'm Eric, the Associate Professor at the Faculty of Management at the UBC Okanagan campus. So we are kind of presenting the seminar on behalf of the International Qualitative Research Network, which is a network of qualitative researchers around the world. And we partner with ATLAS.ti to offer free seminars like this, and also to all the learners who are interested in qualitative research. And today I just would like to do the acknowledgements. So the UBC Okanagan campus is situated in the Silver Okanagan Nations. So we would like to express our gratitude to the land caregivers and also to give us the beautiful land. And also we'd like to invite every one of you to acknowledge the land keeper for your places, and it doesn't matter where you join from, but that and always appreciates the beautiful land we work, we play, and we live on that. So having said that, I would like to pass on to my colleague and Karen to introduce our speaker today. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, everyone. I'm also from UBCO, retired professor from the Faculty of Nursing at the University of Alberta. Our speaker today is my friend and colleague, so I'm happy to do her introduction. Maria Mayan is a professor and vice dean and also associate director of the Community University Partnership in the School of Public Health. She is an engaged scholar who situates her work at the intersection of government, not-for-profit, structurally disadvantaged, and clinician communities. She grounds her work in the policy environment and focuses on how we can work together on complex health and social issues. Her work focuses on the cause of marginalization and how to mobilize against systems of inequity, using primarily qualitative and community-engaged research in rigorous and creative ways. Her experience in qualitative and community-based research has culminated in the second edition of her book, Essentials of Qualitative Inquiry, published by Routledge. Please join me in welcoming Maria.
Thank you, Karen. And indeed, Karen and I go way back in our qualitative journeys together, and it's always lovely to have those great colleagues that you can count on through your entire career, and certainly Karen is one of them. So yes, thank you so much for joining in, everyone, given especially those who are in different time zones that this might be not their great time for thinking and learning, but welcome. So today I am going to just go through really quickly some of the roots and the foundations of community-based participatory research. So just to have the learning outcomes from the workshop description is we'll just spend a moment on what is community. We're going to go into some of the conceptual foundations of community-based participatory research, the roots of participatory research, and then just end off a little bit on what we're going to have to consider when you develop and try and maintain partnerships. So who or what is community, and what do you think about when you hear the term community? We kind of throw it around, community, culture, those kinds of words. But what do you think about? Just pause for a second, and what do you think about when you hear the term community? So for me, Karen introduced me as belonging to the Community University Partnership. So that's a part of my academic community. My research communities, the picture of the oil and gas rigs. I work in a rural community in Alberta. and looking at kind of how they're trying to transform themselves, given that they're tethered to the oil and gas industry. I also work with a community about ending poverty in Edmonton. I work in Indigenous spaces. And then what brings us all here together today is the qualitative community that we have. And there is, as Karen mentioned, the Essentials of Qualitative Inquiry book that was published last year, the second edition. But these are all of the communities that I either work in, and then we of course we have communities that are our social communities, our family communities, our communities that our kids belong to, and so we are involved and belong to a lot of communities. So what is community? So generally, we talk about a community as self-defined group with a shared sense of identity, a group of people with diverse characteristics, but are linked by social ties, share common perspectives, and engage in joint action. So really straightforward, but you can just think about, yeah, for some reason there is a community, there's some kind of sense of belonging. It doesn't have to be a positive, or it doesn't have to be positive all the time, but there is something that ties you together. So there are lots of, for those of you who remember maybe growing up on alphabet soup, it was a soup that had little noodles that had the different letters of the alphabet in it. Um, we kind of talk about this field as being a little bit of alphabet soup or a stew. There's so many terms floating around. Community engaged scholarship, community engaged research. I embed my work in the community-based participatory research literature and language, but there is a lot out there that might be very similar or exactly the same. So just so you're aware that you might come across some of these terms and just take a peek and see if it's the kind of way that you want to work when you come across some of these terms. So what is CBPR? I'm just going to give you a few slides on this, and it should stick with you. It kind of when you're thinking about this space, it does become quite embedded in your brain. So it's a partnership. It is based in a partnership that equitably, fairly involves individuals and groups. So community members, people from government, organizational, whoever you need around the table to work on the issue that you've come together to do something about. So you're involved right there. Everybody's involved right from the beginning. Partners contribute their unique strengths, skills, resources, and have a shared responsibility for the phenomenon. The goal is to integrate knowledge gained with action. Now, that's what makes us, I mean, you'll hear this, but that makes us really unique in that it doesn't end with the research paper or the community report. There's a responsibility for action in this space. Here's a bit more detail that kind of gets into a little bit more about than that slide we just talked about, but community as a unit identity builds on strengths of the community, not a deficit focused. It's equal, it's power sharing, there's co-learning. I learn every single time I interact with a partner. Capacity building among partners, the balance between research and action. It's problems of local relevance to those who are around the table. This is the urgent issues in our community. Looking at I'm in the School of Public Health. We talk about all the determinants of health, income, housing, all of those multiple determinants of health. Cyclical and iterative, you keep going and revisiting and trying. Everybody's involved even in the dissemination process, and it's a long-term process. It's a commitment. Yeah, I'll let you guys handle the questions in the chat. I just see Angela said something. So a long-term process in that when you think about community engagement, an engagement, when you think about being engaged with somebody, it's not a one-time meeting. It's not a 1 month, let's do this. It is an engagement with them over a period of time. So I'm going to try and show a video. We tried it, but we'll see if it works. I'm going to show a video. Please, as you're watching it, I'm just going to do it once. Show the video once. It's about 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes. While you're watching it, what do you see in this activity that relates to community-based research? It relates to community. It relates to strengths-based. It relates to what is a community? How do we come together? So we're gonna watch this, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. You can watch it when you get the video or when you get the PowerPoint. But and in the chat, we won't open it up, but in the chat, just say what you're seeing that could relate to based community-based work. Here we go. And please let me know if it's not working. Okay, are we back to this? Can you see that back to the PowerPoint? Good.
Yes.
Thanks, Eric. In the chat, please comment about what you saw. What was happening there? The Castellers of Catalonia. Put in the chat, what did you notice that could possibly link between community work, community engagement? Can anybody, yeah, built really wide base for support. Yes, before they went up. And most vulnerable members got extra support. Well done. Helmets, so a strong foundation, which Angela is talking about. That you need a strong foundation, strong support, and watching out for the most vulnerable in your partnership. Fantastic comment. Emotions, exactly. Identity, super strong identity, strong themes with emotions. Yep. long term. Yeah, you've got it. You bet they're working together for a long period of time. They just don't show up that day and try this. You know that there's going to be a lot of practice in the background. Togetherness, people relying on each other very, very strongly. Yes, fantastic. So really important for that strong foundation. There's definitely identity, emotion. When I see the stretcher and the ambulance at the end, I think, yeah, there's sometimes there's hurt in these kinds of projects. People get hurt or wounded, and sometimes you think, about if we didn't do this, right? It's the talk or the idea that if you don't try something, you never make progress on something. So sometimes there is hurt that you need to make sure you deal with. But yeah, perfect. So I always keep that in mind about the Castiliers. Um, so thanks to everybody for putting that in. So just to get to some of the roots here, you'll hear sometimes about, of course, participatory action research and community-based participatory research. And I just wanted to spend one slide on this. So there we go. So participatory action research primarily comes out of education, business, more arts. Community-based research primarily comes out of the health sciences. So those are kind of the origins. PAR is a little bit more, I would say, a radical agenda, completely co-participatory, radical social agenda, social justice. In CBPR, you'll see it's more social change, but social justice, we in PAR really look at changing the political structures, the structures that cause disparity. So we want emancipation, frères, emancipation of the oppressed, based in some critical theory, always looking at power structures and more of a southern route. Whereas community-based participatory research, it's not less than, but it really comes, the literature, and it really comes from social reform agenda, so social change. Like we are aware of the power, we're aware of social justice, but we're just trying to alter something in the existing system, a social change. Of course, we do want structural change, but we come together for some social change that eventually we're trying to change structures. We're happy when we can just alter something a little bit, incremental change. Constructivist oriented and has more of a northern health sciences route. So in this, some blurring of the lines over time, which you will struggle with when you do this kind of work about who is an academic researcher, and who is a community member, and you might find yourself in both places. And just to acknowledge the Indigenous route of research is much more on the PAR side, and that literature and action in that space is evolving, and they tend more toward the PAR side of things. So all three routes are about co-creating knowledge to make a difference in our world. So just really quickly, sometimes you'll hear community engagement, and sometimes you'll hear about anti-oppressive work. So community engagement doesn't necessarily involve research. And the student body that I work, a lot are doing their master's or doing graduate work or undergraduate work because they want to be practitioners and they want to be engaged practitioners. So you can collect information, you can work in communities with that community engagement and those principles behind you. So connections and relationships with communities, active and informed participations, and the decisions you make truly reflect the best interests of the communities that you're engaged with. The continuum of engagement for public participation, I find this extremely helpful with the language we use. So this is IAP2 Spectrum. So what I'm putting this in here, you can easily look this up. It's very Googleable, but I really want you to take away from this slide, when you use the word inform or consult or involve or collaborate or empower, what you're communicating when you say those words. So if you say, I'm going to consult with communities, or I'm going to consult with the public to obtain public feedback on analysis and alternatives or decisions. And what you're saying to a community when you say we're going to consult them, we will keep you informed, listen to and acknowledge your concerns and aspirations, and provide feedback on how public influence the decision. So we're going to still make the decision, but we'll kind of go back to you and tell you the rationale for our decision. You'll give us some input, but the final decision lies with us, versus a more of a collaborate or empower. And I think sometimes we get screwed up in our work because we might say we're going to collaborate with you, but really our intention is really just to consult or just to inform or maybe even just to involve. So just from this slide, just really be aware of the language that you use and what that might be communicating to your communities. Anti-oppression work. I just have two of my dear colleagues on the slide here, Ashima in the top right there and Roxanne, and they've really pushed my thinking beyond community-based participatory work into anti-oppression work. So just being very aware of oppression that exists in our society, and starting with, of course, the role of universities and researchers who've played a significant role in the oppression of certain groups over time. So starting there, it's always easy to point fingers at other groups of people. It's always important to start with your own context and how you've been involved in anti-oppressive work and how it still happens within our institutions and our governments and our other communities. So how is anti-oppressive work a little bit different from CBPR? You can go through this list when you get the PowerPoint. A lot of it will say the same words: commitment to social justice, social change, but really, really making explicit the political side of knowledge creation. Again, we do that in CBPR, we do that in PAR, but this is really, really, really making certain that the political side of knowledge creation is up front and center. The rest of them would be mirrors very much what we've already talked about today. Troubling the norm, troubling dominant culture, political side is making the anti-oppressive just a little bit different, just pushing us a little bit different in this space. So I just want to share with you an article that I would hope now that you might pause if you read an article like this. And this is a classic epidemiology article. I'm in the School of Public Health. We train epidemiologists. It's a very important methodology to understand trends. Kept us very aware during COVID. So this article, you may think it's old, but this work still certainly happens. So this article was on adult Métis smokers. So the findings were adult Métis who reported, and then they just give the relationship, a high level of spirituality involved in their community, and that high spirituality were less likely to be smokers. Spoke an Indigenous language, lived in a house where an Indigenous language was spoken, were more likely to be current smokers. Being a member of a Métis organization, attending cultural events, couldn't really say anything there. Higher, shockingly, and I'm saying that with tongue in cheek, higher household income, greater education, less likely. Heavy alcohol consumption, more likely to be current smokers. So the danger of these really narrow kinds of works, again, I don't want you to say that this is not epidemiology or this kind of work isn't valued, but the danger when we take a really closed perspective is often we'll look at this. This is certainly, and if we were in a class right now, this is certainly not a strengths-based approach. We're not looking at assets of communities in an article like this. And the danger is we often will see something like this and we'll go, oh, we have to, let's develop a program. We've got some data here. Let's develop a program. And this program would be, okay, they speak their own language. Oh, we better, but they're a smoker. We want to reduce smoking. Oh, we better tell them not to speak their own language anymore. Let's get them to not speak their own language. So there's dangers in this very, very narrow approach. And let's take away cultural events or not fund them or whatever, because it really has no, bearing on current smoking. So there's so much danger in these very limited scoped kind of work research. So in the right-hand corner is a colleague of mine, Malcolm King, who wrote a response to this. And you can look at this again in the journal, Canadian Journal of Public Health. And he said, this is not okay, even though it's scientifically, methodologically, epidemiologically sound, thus got published. Should such research be considered valid, valuable, and even ethical, given the lack of contextualization and validation from members of the community under investigation? So he's really querying from a community-based perspective. Fine, from the way we're trained epidemiologists, it is good research. But really, is it valid? Is it valuable? And is it ethical? So I will leave that with you. In your research, or in Malcolm King's example, think about, what is your gaze? How do you gaze at a community? Does it further marginalize the community? How you're talking about the community, the research, the data that you're working with, does it further marginalize the community? What has defined this topic as a problem? Is smoking a problem? My public health colleagues might not, strike me down, but what would the community have said their most urgent issue is? And could you work with me on this? Would it be smoking? Maybe. I'm not sure. How do you avoid damage-centered, deficit-focused research? How do you pay attention to structural oppression versus what this article, I think, does is individual blame? So again, really, really hard questions, meaty questions that you really have to acknowledge and think through when you're designing research, wanting to do community-based research. Okay, so far, and I'm looking at our time, good. So far, we've done what is community, this shared belonging, this, again, doesn't always have to be a good experience, or always positive, but you belong to many communities, academic and personal, professional and personal. The conceptual foundation, so what is community-based participatory research, and then the roots of that PAR and community-based participatory research, and is it social justice, social action? So that was kind of those objectives, those learning objectives. So what I want to get into now is just a little bit of partnership phases. Now this is quite straightforward. Cargo and Mercer is a 2008 article that I get still. My Israel et al. And Cargo and Mercer are again two like foundational articles that if you're going to start writing on this in this space and learning in this space, those would be your kind of go-to ones. So partnership phases. There's pre-planning, there's formalization of the partnership, then there's the implementation. Here we get going, and then maintenance, of course, which is always, or sustainability, which is always, really difficult when the grant money runs out, or when money's run out generally. But the pre-planning phase, I just want to talk about pre-planning and the formalization part a little bit. So pre-planning is really understanding deeply the context. Do your homework. What and who is this community? Even if you belong to this community, there might be things that you don't appreciate or you don't fully understand, and there's more, you got to spend more time in understanding an organization and how it runs and what are the issues and the challenges and things like that. So really, really understanding the context of where you want to be and what the spaces that you want to engage in. And then formalization is, okay, we know what we want to do together. And then let's talk, get the structures and the pieces in place for formalization of our partnership. So when we talk about, getting people together, we have to think about who are the end users, the beneficiaries, who needs to be at that table, right? Who's going to be responsible for some of the action part or sharing it within the communities? Which academic disciplines do we need? I have over the years truly grown to really appreciate my colleagues in communications. Communications of issues and how to do that best. My colleagues in psychology, and understanding how somebody needs to have hope, and they understand the psychology of hope. So what academic disciplines do you need at the table? Values, do you have shared values, and what are the values driving the research, and how we have to be explicit about those values? How will the research results be translated into practice or action? Who needs to be involved to make sure there's good science, there's good methodology, that it won't be thrown out because it's not good methodology, but that it's socially relevant to the community, it's culturally relevant, it's economically relevant. The utilization of resources and assets from the community are maximized. So this is that kind of capacity building, strengths-based, what are the gems and the strengths in your communities that we can draw on to highlight and showcase and walk alongside to make this the best it can be. And sustainability, who needs to be involved to, like, okay, after the money's run out or after we finish that first phase, who needs to be there to make sure that it's sustainable? And what other stakeholders do you need to reach your goals as a partnership? We won't go through this specifically, but always thinking, who partners in research when you're inviting partners to the table, who partners in the research, and why? Why are they at the table? And, you don't want to essentialize and say, oh, government's only there because they have to look good in front of their electorate. Okay, maybe, maybe, but they also have responsibilities for certain social issues. And a lot of people in government are our colleagues who can work things from different angles to bring about the good change that we have, we want to see together. Parapublic sector, the education system, the healthcare system, private industry. I've worked a lot in business and industry in the last 5 years. And in my younger years, I always wanted to demonize industry and business, that they just don't understand, they don't get it, it's all for themselves. And I've been, put to shame with a lot of the industry and businesses that I've worked with. Coming to the table and wanting to see things for their communities. Not-for-profit sector, of course, NGOs, citizen groups, and your communities, your First Nations communities, your neighborhoods. So it's always important to kind of have this conversation about who should we invite and why? Why will they want to be there? In my partnerships, I say right up front, I need a publication out of this. This is how I come. I come to this in this space. I come to this with these values. But by the way, I also need a publication, and we can talk about how that publication gets done and shared and names on it and all of that stuff. But being explicit about in my day-to-day job, this is what I'm going to need so that I can be in this partnership. So many ways to formalize that partnership. That was that second phase. I highly recommend you doing an MOU or a research agreement of some sort, a memorandum of understanding or research agreement. Sometimes it might have to go into a legal agreement through your institution. There's some really, really good stuff on setting up partnerships in the Tri-Council ethics on Chapter 9. But what a memorandum of understanding does is details responsibilities. So there's lots, if you Google memorandum of understanding, you're going to get tons and tons of models out there, how-tos. It just details the responsibilities of everybody coming to the table. So roles and responsibilities. What's Maria responsible for? What is she going to do? How often are you going to meet? What are the deliverables? At what time? What do we think we can accomplish by a certain date? Um, the financial plan, who holds the money? How do people get paid? What happens when there's an unforeseen expense, et cetera? Communications, you might have a separate communications plan, especially if it's a very involved partnership. If it's involving government, does anything we say have to go through the different ministries or the different, that might slow us down. How is this going to work? Ownership data. Who owns data? Where does that reside? So MOUs, you go through these kinds of questions. And so one of my favorites is this Colorado collaboration, creating an MOU. You might want to take a look at that. And then there's also a really good one with an interactive interface to build an MOU through the Greenlining Institute. So you can take a look at that. But research agreements is the most important thing about research agreements, of course, or MOUs, is of course you have the document after, and when things might be going a little bit awry, or things might be like, oh, look at this is happening, and we should do this, and we should do this, and we should do this. You sometimes have to pause and go, let's go back to what we decided on and how we decided to work. And because sometimes if things get, if there's some conflict that arises, or you're getting so excited because there's so many opportunities coming at you, you go back to your MOU and go, okay, let's revisit this and make sure we're on solid ground and understanding what we're trying to do together. But perhaps the most important thing about research agreements or MOUs, it makes you have these conversations. It makes you have discussions on, why are we at the table? What is success? My success looks different than your success. We can make sure we reach both of our successes or our needs for successes. What the sustainability of the partnership, what post-project steps can be considered to sustain. So you have those hard conversations up front, and having those conversations is so helpful to the health of the partnership, and to what you're doing together. So then in a year or 6 months or 3 months or in a week, when somebody goes, whoa, 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 I thought we were going to do this, or I thought monies were going to flow to my community in this way or whatever. And you go, no, no, no. You've had those really hard discussions. And so I really, really think, I really encourage you to develop those kinds of documents. So, what is community? We've talked about that, conceptual foundation, roots, and then just a little bit on what you need to consider in partnership development, who's at the table, who should be at the table, and then in partnership maintenance. So I just want to throw a couple comments out here. And I know there's a webinar that I believe Karin and Eric are doing on Monday on ethics. And so ethics is, as we were discussing when we got on early for the webinar, about how ethics is changing so quickly. And often when things go wrong, you have this conversation about, what do we need to do to make sure that never happens again. And certainly ethics boards came out of the Nuremberg trial because there were really terrible, terrible experiments on individuals during World War II under the name of research and science. And so then we thought, whoa, 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 that's terrible. Institutions, universities are doing this terrible work. We need to have research ethics boards. So ethics is changing very, very quickly, and we have to think about ethics differently in community-based research as well. So procedural ethics, or what you need to do at your ethics board, it's either, there are community-based ethics boards if you're not associated with an institution that you have to go through. So it's you will remain anonymous. Your data will be confidential. You can withdraw at any time. This is the possibilities of physical or psychological distress you might feel. You might feel uncomfortable asking some questions, but you don't need to answer all of them. So it's our generic ethics that we go through a board, and they're making sure we are behaving ethically. But really, in community-based work, there's a thing we call situational ethics, and another idea that we call relational ethics. So situational ethics refers to ethics in practice, unexpected, unpredictable, where the researcher has little control over the events, but you go, whoa, uh-oh, I'm feeling very uncomfortable now and I don't know what to do. So for example, you've just had a meeting with a group or individuals, and somebody says, I have no money for food tonight. Can you give me some money? Can you drive me home? Those kinds of things. Can you come in? Can you come in for coffee or tea after you've driven me home? So those like, oops, this wasn't covered in my procedural ethics that I did the ethics board, but I'm in relationship with this person. I'm trying to build trust, etc. But am I comfortable with this? And is this something that I should do? Relational ethics even takes that one step further and recognize and values mutual respect, dignity and connectedness between researcher and researched, and between researchers and the communities in which they live and work. So it is not just the situation, but then it's this I'm in relationship with you, and what does ethics look like when I'm in relationship with you? So, we often talk about this area as an ethic of friendship. And so, and it comes a lot from the feminist literature, but when you are acting as a friend, and in a friendship way, and you've got trust and you have relationship, and then you don't uphold the ethic and the relationship of a friendship, how does that unfold for you, and what does that do within your partnership and within your project together? So those are two things in community-based work that again layers on that you really have to think about as you proceed in this space. So I'm ready to take any questions, and if there's no questions or whatever, please take home messages, anything that you're like, okay, this is the one thing I got out of this, or anything. I am happy to open it up and discuss.
All right, Maria, thank you very much. A really insightful presentation, and we will be moving on to the discussion part of this webinar, excuse me. For all of you who are attending live, make sure that you post any questions that you might have in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will take them in order. So I'm looking at the order of in the Q and the first one comes anonymously in the Q&A. What do you mean by Southern and Northern? They're not terms I've heard before.
Oh, yeah, of course. So the southern route, that side, that really the participatory action research, excuse me, came out of Southern social justice movements. You will probably have heard of participatory action research, Frere, who really talked about um, oppression and really targets looking at the oppressed and having the oppressed kind of in a social movement rising up to say we will no longer live like this, we will no longer be treated like this. So it's a real liberation movement from the South. And so Brazil, Freire came from Brazil. So that Southern social movement, kind of the liberation angle, whereas the Northern route, North America, community-based research coming out more of the North and doesn't really have that social movement aspect to it.
Interesting. All right, thank you. So what we have in the chat, and Carlene says, funders' agendas also influence level of participation, and we take great care to navigate those lanes. So you mentioned, I believe you mentioned briefly about funding, and I guess government interests, but I guess also private funding from
Yeah.
private grant organizations get also factor into the research
Mhm.
process.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've done your own community-based work. But yeah, funders for sure want to see certain outcomes. Of course, they're funding you. They want to see this many people employed. They want to see this much food distributed, whatever. But you know what? I know I'm in a privileged position to be able to say this. I have worked with funders who are philanthropists. So in my currency, and it might be in yours, is to get the big grants that are the most prestigious. Absolutely, I have to play in that space. But the people, the philanthropy, the community foundations, the small players that will give you 10,000, 15,000, whatever, to say, oh, I trust you. I know you do good work. Here's a bit of money to get you going in this. I am more than happy and more than honored to accept that money to make, because really at the end of the day, it's yes, I would love to have very, very prestigious funding, but at the end of the day, we have some funding and there's less strings attached sometimes to that more local community funding.
Absolutely. Carlene has another comment. I really appreciate the sustainability ideas, especially in building sustainable outcomes and uptake of outcomes so that they are embedded in communities, organizations, post-research, or on depletion of funds. Making the rules explicit, like stating out front who gets what out of it, is essential.
Yeah.
I guess she's looking at it from the what does the community get out of the research, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think yeah, again, it sounds like you've been in this space for quite some time. I think and probably what I'm saying is you're very aware of this. What does the community get out of it? I think being really clear up front, expectations is really important and you know, we say in our grant writing or when we're going to change policy on. Well, we're not. Like we're not. But granting agencies kind of make us say, we're going to change policy on this or we're going to change this. Changing policy in the social space is extremely difficult. We know that. We've been working on poverty, we've been working on food insecurity, we've been working on houselessness for centuries, right? And we somehow still don't have some kind of like plan. We might have some plans around, but you know, so it is being really clear. So I'll write in a grant, we're going to change blank. I'll write whatever they need to hear. You know, a funder, you know, our big funders. But being really clear up front, saying, okay, if we can change even this little bit, we are going to be happy. We are going to be so happy. So I guess just being really clear about what does the community get, being really clear about the expectations is really important in that space. And the sustainability, you're right. It really does come to the people you work with, that uptake, even if it's a different way a community organization welcomes their clients, welcomes the way they walk through the door and talks about an intake form, something like, even if it's that small, different ways a community organization, for example, can interact with their clients. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a big homeless policy. It can be an intake form. It can be just a greeting. You greet people differently now.
Exactly. All right. And moving on to, I'm going to try to get to as many people's questions as possible. Angela says, it sounds like you're referring to the global South, as opposed to in the US. When we say Southern, we mean the culture of Southern states. If you can clarify that.
Yeah, global South. Thank you. Yeah.
Global South. All right. And then Jamal said,
Mhm.
completely co-participatory and selective co-participation. What is the main difference?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great comment. Yeah, again, if you read the literature, you'll go, okay, it's got to be completely co-participatory, because that's the way this I'm supposed to be behaving, and we're supposed to be doing this. So whether it's completely co-participatory or selective, um, the take-home message there is that when you work with communities, it's a negotiation. You don't say to your community partner, you have to be involved in this. You have to collect data because that means that we're building capacity in your community. You have to help with this. You sit down with the community and say, what makes most sense in how we work together. So what you saw there in that slide is kind of the literature or what we, the ideal, I guess, maybe. But really, in any kind of engagement process, you sit down and you negotiate or you talk about what makes most sense here. I have a full-time job that allows me to, work in this space. I can do some of the heavy lifting here. You can only participate once a month on Zoom for 30 minutes to give us your wonderful. We'll take it. That's fantastic. So you sit down and you go, what makes most sense for all of us around the table here to carry this through? And they don't have to be involved in every single part. Especially I found in the data analysis interpretation. I would say interpretation is probably your most important component. Because when you see data and you go, oh, here's the way I'm going to interpret this, the community goes, oh, no, that's what this means in our community. This is how we see this. So if you're gonna ask communities to be for sure, like where you really need them, I would say would be in the interpretation of data.
Very well. Thank you. As I said, we're taking questions up to the top of the hour, so please feel free to add them in the chat and the Q&A. Maybe something from me is that I see a tension. How do I say this? I'm trying to pinpoint the nuance in community-based participatory research where are we that one nuance it is about improving communities, improving the local context, where we're probably at the same time conducting research and contributing to scientific knowledge. And another nuance is here is the where we want to focus on the community, want to improve lives, and at some point we may be just de-emphasizing research. It's an aspect, it's a required component of the endeavor that we are trying to commit to, but we are, our community comes first, and that might come at the sacrifice of, as you mentioned, deliverables. Maybe when you're working with marginalized populations, vulnerable populations who may not be willing to commit, I don't want my utterances to be reported in a research paper, but I want to influence my local community. So can you not publish this report? So, I mean, where is that tension, and is that a real concern with community-based participatory research?
Yeah, it's would be a really cool discussion to have. So lots of thoughts. I think you can still, from the point of a community member going, I don't want any of my to be associated with this at all, but I do want to see some change, but I don't want to be associated with it at all. In the projects that I've done, you know how, I mean, we all experience this, how being involved in something is a health promoting activity itself. So even being involved, even if, fails, even if something fails, you don't receive you don't, the end result, what you were gunning for doesn't come. Being together, having discussions, sharing stories, is a health promoting activity in itself and a good thing to do. So, but sometimes that's a good thing and people enjoy that and say, I've learned, I appreciate this. I see the world in a different way now, and that's where you go. I've also worked with communities who specifically say, I want my name involved. I want my name attached to this. I'm so tired of this. I want my voice attached to this, and I want you to run with it. So you've kind of got that extreme. And I think more and more people are doing that, and more communities are doing that. And you know where I think, actually, I'm teaching a community-based class right now. And last week, so I'm going to steal my student's idea, but she's like, I agree with her. She said, don't you think we should just stop doing research in the social space? Just stop right now and focus on implementation. So if any of you are aware of implementation science, I'm like, yeah, I think implementation science is. So do we need to know any more about how to improve food insecurity, how to improve the unhoused situation? Do we need more research on that? Do we need to know the experience of the unhoused? Do we kind of know that it's really crappy to be unhoused, and we kind of know what that means in our space, in my space, I would say we did. Should we study instead implementation, or the lack of policy, the lack of, and how you can change, so you can focus on why things aren't working, why governments, private, whatever, where things are getting stalled, and where you need to push to get that evidence taken up. So, if you're starting out, implementation science is a very, very good space to be in, because we do have a lot of evidence. We do have a lot of evidence.
Hmm. Sounds good. We have a couple of extra questions. Major Bean says, how to ensure boundaries while practicing relational ethics.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's just the throw that out there, and you really have to work through it yourself. You have to work through it with your colleagues. And I would say, yeah, it's just one of those things that just be aware that this is a thing, and that you do have boundaries, I guess, and that you do say, oh, I probably shouldn't, or thank you very much, but I probably shouldn't do that, or, but then you find yourself going to a birthday party the next week or whatever. So it's, you keep that at the forefront of your mind. You keep at the forefront how you might be, coming across. And that is just that's what makes this work so layered, is there's no answer there. How do
This
you
is
like
one of the
that? There's no
it's one of the
answer.
many forms of messiness in
Yeah.
research, isn't it? Jennifer says, can you speak to how this relates to developmental evaluation, which is highly participatory, utility, and context focus? It engages with research practices, transparent ones, not academic but applied. Lots of people doing this in the health sector and humanitarian efforts. This is the real-time learning and research and implementation.
Yep. Totally. I know exactly what you're talking about, Jennifer. And I would say they're just in different disciplines, right? Like you're pulling on the evaluation literature. I have a colleague who's in this office right next to me, who's an evaluation specialist. She calls herself a community-based participatory research, but she does developmental evaluation. I would say they're just, again, different disciplines grow up their own kind of practices. And so developmental evaluation, real-time evaluation, of course, we all know Michael Quinn Patton, all of that work. I would say you've got mirroring happening there.
Hmm. Great. If it's okay with the time left, we have let's take care of two more questions. And then Carlene says, with boundaries, we usually ask ourselves, can I maintain this action response? What is the cost if I engage and then exit later on? I don't know if I'm an ethnographer. I don't, I need to be better at being more strategic with these boundaries. And there's a whole, there's a whole discipline about it. I would say that
There is.
it's tricky to teach newer researchers, I would say. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know we usually ask ourselves, can I maintain this action response? What's the cost if I engage? Yeah. And again, I think it's that expectations up front. Hey, if we get more funding, we'd love to continue working together, but who knows, right? Like for now, we're committing to each other for the next year, but hopefully, like when are we going to start writing more grants? And I think it just there isn't a lot written on that exit, right? Of exiting communities. And without that hurt. And sometimes people are hurt. And sometimes, yeah, lives change and it's not a collective decision. Um, but yeah, so I think it's always again, and believe me, my projects have not done smooth sailing, all of them. Like this is I totally understand what you're saying. What is the cost if you exit later on? Um, and it is, always just the way I try and deal with it is always just trying to be really clear and expectations and who I am and what I can bring to the partnership and what I can't bring to the partnership.
Absolutely. And final question from Jamal says, does the community engagement incorporate the community organization?
Like probably almost always, I think, Jamal, if you're kind of asking about the nonprofit sector, pro generally always, pretty much always, it involves the community organizations because they often are the place where people feel welcome and protected and go to, even if they don't. But yes, it's almost always with community organizations.
All right. And a very vibrant discussion. And I want to thank everybody for all their questions. Wish we could take all of them. But I think that Maria, if you have any final thoughts before we conclude.
No, I just really appreciate the questions. It sounds like a lot of people are familiar and struggle with the same things I struggle with. So thank you for that. It makes me feel I'm in good company.
And thank you to Maria for taking the time out of her busy schedule for this presentation today. Thank you to Karin and thank you to Eric for organizing this webinar. And that will conclude today's webinar as part of the IQRN series. Please stay tuned for our next webinar coming up on Monday, Canada time, for information on that. Check out the IQRN website or the ATLAS.ti website for free registration, and that will close out the 2024 calendar year on IQRN. And for all, to close out, I want to thank everybody for joining in. And my name is Raul Seibing, Senior Trainer at ATLAS.ti, and I want to thank all of you once more, and we will see you again at another IQRN webinar. Everyone take care.